Hi. Recently, I watched all of Game of Thrones, and after years of buildup of being disappointed by the finale, I surprisingly wasn't. Today, I want to talk about the best and the worst of Game of Thrones and why people are hating on all the wrong things. And if you don't want some spoilers, you're about to get some. In 2011, Game of Thrones aired its first season, and this season was praised for its very good plot, accuracy to the book, and overall acting, soaring with high ratings. When starting the show, I found it rather jarring, the amount of sexually exploitative scenes within Game of Thrones, and typically it was always women shown. There was even a point I got to in the show where the only women I recognized in the show had a nudity scene, were a child, or had a no nudity clause within their contract with the show, which made me a little bit frustrated because it's upsetting that women, in order to be on this show, had to either show their naked bodies or fight for their right or be underage, so it's illegal for them to show their naked bodies. So not a great viewing start, but I pushed through because I heard of all the greatness and I wanted to see what led to this huge fall that I had heard so much about. In season 1 of the show, we're introduced to many of our main characters. Specifically, the Stark family takes a hold of this season, and we have the main Stark family, their bastard child, and their stolen child, which they don't let you forget no matter what.
You are the bastard, though.
Lord Eddard Stark is my father.
And Lady Stark is not your mother, making you bastard.
But somehow, even with stolen children, the Stark family is still the good guys throughout the show. And then, of course, we have the incest couple. And not that incest couple, actually another incest couple. That one comes much later. We also get some of my favorite character introductions, including Tyrion, who is my favorite character throughout the show because he's more morally sound. I wouldn't say he's perfect, definitely not, and a lot better than the books from what I've heard. I haven't read the books. I know, no one hate me, okay? Just not a big reader, okay? I'm trying. Anyways, it's Peter Dinklage. What's not to love? And then there's Arya. I love Arya. She's a very hard-headed character, and I feel like she kind of just does whatever she wants, and most of the time it kind of makes sense what she's doing, so I support her actions. In season 1, we get a lot of build-up to this amazing world that is the Game of Thrones universe. And within this, we get a lot of nods to the future, specifically with Hodor, who we actually don't find out why actually only says Hodor for so many more seasons, which I love that it's brought in through season 1 all the way to the end. One of the amazing things about this show overall is the casting. Specifically, that they're able to keep most of their characters, only a few actually leave throughout the show. And these child actors, which typically as they grow up, aren't necessarily the strongest, stayed very strong actors, which was a really well done job by the casting directors. One thing I love in the early seasons is that we don't jump into all the perspectives right when we start watching the show. We slowly build up to that, and I think that's what makes this show so great, is you aren't bombarded with too much information, but you're given enough information to stay engaged. I think some shows nowadays are expecting you to just be double screening, and so you don't actually get that thought process where you have to think while watching a show, which, I'll be honest, I miss. The members of the Stark family that are most important actually turn out to be their children, which you aren't necessarily expecting from the early episodes, as the king of half up and half downs is really taking charge, especially in the first episode. One of the Stark children, Sansa, who is frequently disrespectful and a brat,
Please, it's the only thing I ever wanted,
becomes such a prominent character and someone you ultimately see as very resilient. But that doesn't necessarily hold up in the latest season, season 8, where Sansa's kind of just a brat again and goes back kind of to her old ways. But I mean, if I looked like Sophie Turner, I would also turn into a brat, so I get it. In season 1, I actually didn't expect to get so enthralled with the characters and enjoy them so much. Specifically, the man I'm paying homage to today, Mr. Ned Stark. When all of season 1's buildup goes to his episode, where he finally gets a chop off the top, I did not expect to be so emotionally distraught over that scene. And this climax in the episode really builds up to the following seasons, with Arya making her escape and getting out of the city, which she's alone for seasons and years after this, just because of this one episode. And Sansa is put in this situation where she's at the will of Joffrey, who continuously harms her and mentally abuses her, but it ultimately builds her into this more likable character. We also get to see this darkness within Joffrey in the episode where Ned Stark dies, which I really enjoy. The actor that plays Joffrey is really an amazing actor in general, because I genuinely was like, I hate this person. It was really, really good acting. And one thing I'm really glad that they chilled out on was saying winter is coming literally like 6 times an episode in season 1. I'm like, y'all gotta come up with something else. We can't keep saying the same 4 lines over and over again. It was a little bit intense, but it chilled out slowly and slowly. And just saying, they built up to this winter for so long. And did the winter ever really happen? Because it was like 1 week of snow in King's Landing, and then they're like, nah, fuck it. Like, we did what we were supposed to do. Winter came and it went. Pissing me off. Anyways, the scene where Ned Stark dies kind of brings us into the 2nd season, where Robb, one of Ned Stark's children, is at war with all of King's Landing, especially now being the King of the North, and some of the Stark family members are pissing me off in this season. Specifically, Robb, Theon, and Catherine. And yes, Theon is part of the Stark family. Fight me on it. Fight me on it. And why these characters are pissing me off. Specifically, Theon, he goes off the rails. I'm like, I don't understand what originally triggered him to ditch this family he's been with for so many years. I get that he felt neglected by his actual biological family, which is understandable, but I love how easily you're able to see that he's getting overwhelmed with his decisions that he's making, and he thinks it's going to get better, and it just like keeps getting worse, which I was like, he deserved all the bad shit that happened to him. I'm sorry. Call me evil, whatever. And then fucking Catherine, bro. I'm sorry, in what world is it logical to let Jaime Lannister run around and be like, no, yeah, I believe you. You're so trustworthy. Go save my daughters. Why would he have the power to do that? He's just been captured for months now, and you think he can just run back to King's Landing and be like, oh yeah, just give those girls back. It's like, no, Cersei's crazy. She wants fucking retribution, and her children are her little puppets. Catherine's just stupid. And then Robb, on the other hand, he's all over the place with this random chick, and he's like, I'm in love though, and like, go for it, be in love. I'm so happy for you. Do it on the down low, because you're literally risking so many people's lives for this entire thing, and you're like, but I get to be married. You might die in war, but like, I'm gonna marry this girl even if it means that more people are gonna die, because I want to be happy. Like, fuck off, you're so selfish. Anyways, Stark family, logical thinking, not in the same sentence. Unless you're Arya, because love Arya. Or Ned Stark. Also love Ned Stark. Anyways, all these characters were stupid in their own regard, but I will say, I did love the love story between Robb and his wife. As much as it was a very selfish and stupid decision, I did like the build-up and how they progressed and showed the relationship between them. And I feel like this is why I'm not anti all sex scenes or scenes like that within a show, because I felt like that one, along with Jon and Ygritte's, were very well placed. And there's definitely some love stories that should not have been shown, even if they were technically actually in love. I don't need to see someone who I thought was still a child in this show have sex with someone. Like, why are we showing Arya? And also, why are we showing Homeboy? I just didn't like it. I'm sorry. Not all love scenes need to be seen, okay? In season 2, we also get one of the best fighting scenes in Game of Thrones, specifically Battle of the Blackwater, where Stannis arrives at King's Landing and essentially Tyrion balls the fuck out, okay? I'm sorry, he's always choosing the winning side, he's logical, and I love him. Within each season, I felt like it moved so quickly and I was able to gather so much information, and there wasn't necessarily that lull period where you feel in other episodes. As you move on to season 3 and 4, you continuously get that really good writing and the world building. Specifically, season 3 and 4 are my favorite seasons. I think they contain some of the best episodes. And as I was watching these episodes, I kept realizing all my favorite ones didn't have random sex scenes that did not matter. It was like very frustrating watching this show because sometimes it felt like they were just trying to be like throwing smut at the wall, and they're like, somebody's gotta love this. And like, maybe the weirdos online, and unfortunately the weirdos on payroll, loved that, but as a viewer who was interested in good writing and not exploiting women, I didn't necessarily love it. And as much as I would love to talk in depth about every single season and every episode, because I really do like diving into these, I want to jump into the real juice of it all. Season 8, the final season. The final season of Game of Thrones had so many complaints that I do and do not agree with. First of all, the plot armor of some of the characters got quite out of hand, especially when you compare it to the earlier seasons where they kill off majority of the Stark family, several family members of each household. It's a lot more impactful when you know not every character is safe. I feel like Stranger Things kind of struggled with this as well. In their final season, they refused to kill off any of their main characters, which ultimately hurts the plot because it makes it a lot less realistic in a way. Specifically in the fight against the Night King, the only characters that survive are the characters where I recognize their faces. I don't understand why writers always think you can't kill off a main character, because you totally can. It actually, I think, makes the show better when you're willing to part with characters and not hold on to them for dear life. Also within the fight against the Night King, all the Dothraki run off into the night and their little flames go out. There's like 2 that survive. And then 6 episodes later, oh my bad, 4 episodes later, because why is this season so much shorter than the rest of the seasons? It makes no sense. It's like the most information you have to fit into a season. Yeah, it's actually just cut out all the details and shove it into 6 episodes. That'll be great. No. Okay. Anyways, Dothraki go missing. Dothraki at Cersei house? How does that happen? How do they just revive themselves? But it's okay. Things can happen off screen. I fully understand that. People were complaining about Ilaria specifically not dying on screen, but I don't really think it was necessary for her to die. Her daughter's death was the impactful one. She could have been tortured for months or not even been dead by the time we got to it, so there wouldn't have necessarily been a point to showing those details. There's so much other information and things that needed to be covered. Another thing about the fight with the Night King, people like to complain that Arya was the illogical choice to kill the Night King, and to that, I strongly disagree. I think she was the perfect choice in order to do this. Her character had been building up to this moment since season 1, where they had her trying to chase the cat and be quiet as possible, and being a stealthy sword fighter. She's ultimately standing up against Brienne of Tarth and actually being able to have full-blown practice fights with her. And you think she's incapable of killing this person when she's essentially a top swords person. Just because she's young and a woman doesn't make her not worthy of being able to kill them. That's my opinion, but like, why do you think she wouldn't be a good choice? Is it because she's not Jon Snow? Did you want Jon Snow to do it? Sorry, Jon Snow's busy. He's got to fly on top of a dragon for the entire fucking fight in the dark. Homeboy did nothing. That was one of the things that bummed me out, but it kind of made sense. He was trying to fight, and he's one of the only people that actually can ride a dragon. So, I mean, who else are you gonna throw up there? Now with Theon, I feel like Theon's character in the final season is done really well and has a full tied up situation where he's actually going back to his original family and making amends with them in order to fix their relationship. Another character tied up really well is Sansa, because Sansa gets to be a little princess forever, and she goes right back to that entitlement, talking down to everyone, because that's just what Homegirl's made to do. Like, she started doing it, and she's gonna keep doing it. So, but then there's Daenerys, and Daenerys is a fully different conversation. I don't necessarily think she's tied up perfectly, but I think when people argue that her character wouldn't have necessarily acted out in the way she did by burning thousands of people and having a bit of a breakdown, I think that's not necessarily accurate. Her having a breakdown on the surface kind of seems like a large shift, but as she was younger, she was told to be quiet and respectful to all above her. But when her brother dies, you continuously see her have this shift where she does not allow people to stand up to her at all. She does not like when people disagree with her or don't bow down to her. And you see her kill several people that are more and more integral to the plot, ultimately landing us on Varys, which is kind of her breaking point. This, alongside a long history of family mental health issues, it makes sense that she would ultimately snap. I mean, 2 generations earlier, her relative tried to burn down the entire city of King's Landing. So it's hard to argue that it wouldn't be likely that she would also have some mental health issues when it's brought up so often that Targaryens frequently have mental health issues.
What's the saying? Every time a Targaryen is born, the gods flip a coin.
Likely due to all the incest. Whatever though, whatever. And with that, I'm not saying I liked that Daenerys killed everyone. I'm just saying it made sense that she did it. And I think that's where a lot of the issues arise about the final season, is what the characters did or didn't do does make sense, but a lot of the details are lacking. Specifically with Arya, I think this is an interesting thing because a lot of people say it doesn't make sense for her to want to go all of a sudden exploring instead of staying with Sansa or Brandon in King's Landing, but I think it does make sense. Arya essentially has been traveling and exploring for years by herself. Why would she suddenly, a very independent woman, go back home and be like, yeah, no, I'm gonna chill here and actually be a princess? From the beginning, she said she didn't want to do that, and so her going to explore did make sense, but I wish there was more details ingrained within her character wanting to actually get that information and why she wanted to go explore. And there's a lot of situations like this within season 8, but I can't explain away everything, and I get they were definitely on a tight timeline, especially cutting down those episodes to just 6 instead of their regular around 10 episodes per season. But even with that, that doesn't mean you can just omit all important details and be like, nah, let's just hit the high points and we'll just keep going. It doesn't make a good story. You're just going through the motions at that point. In the final season, there's a lot left to wonder, even after the season ends. And I feel like this is likely because of the lack of books that they had to base off of. But it's kind of apparent the writers didn't understand the magic of the world. And instead of making a explicit distinction of what it could be, they decided to omit it altogether instead of actually possibly being wrong. Specifically, we're missing out on many opportunities explaining what the motive of the Ice King actually was. And again, there were a lot of great adaptations from the book originally, specifically with how they decided to build the world with set design and casting. But when the books ran out, the plot ran with it and left so many things drastically underexplained, like the three-eyed raven. Which kind of brings us to one of the worst things about Game of Thrones, Brandon Stark. He has so much built into him as a character and so much build-up, even from the first season, and he ultimately becomes the three-eyed raven, which what even is the three-eyed raven? Because I'm sorry, he just walks around knowing everything in the universe. We don't know how it really started or anything like that, but Brandon Stark is the three-eyed raven and everyone fucking believes him. It's just frustrating to see that Brandon never actually has to explain himself for being the three-eyed raven. People are just like, no, yeah, that makes sense. No, for sure. It just doesn't make sense, okay? That's all I'm saying. And it almost comes off as corny at times, especially when he's chosen as the new king.
He crossed beyond the wall, a crippled boy, and became the three-eyed raven. He is our memory.
Although in earlier episodes he admits he has no emotions anymore, he's not actually Brandon Stark, and he doesn't function as a normal person, everyone's like, yeah, no, I also vote Brandon Stark. It's like middle school elections are more intense than this. Why everyone just sitting in a circle holding hands? Thousands of people just died and no one's gonna like put up a fight for who should be king. Everyone's just like, no, yeah, that makes sense. The random kid who just suddenly appeared and says he knows everything from the past and future, he's our guy. Also, like, half y'all aren't even allowed to vote. Why are you here? You're just a main character, so you're sitting in this circle. You should be long gone. Speaking of people long gone, Jon Snow is suddenly out and about again, and we bring up the Night's Watch. Why is the Night's Watch still a thing? The Night's Watch should be completely disbanded because the whole purpose of the Night's Watch was protecting against things past the wall, and the things past the wall were the wildlings and the Night King and his army. Wildlings are chill now. Night King gonzo. And then we get this final scene, essentially showcasing one of Brandon's first decisions as king to make Bronn the master of coin. Essentially, it just felt like they did this in order to make the joke that brothels should be brought back first.
Well, speaking of builders, all the best brothels burned down. The Master of Coin is willing to fund reconstruction.
Which just felt relatively cheap in the grand scheme of things when they had so much great writing in the earlier part of the season. And actually, now that I think about it, the worst thing in season 8 actually isn't even how terrible Brandon Stark is. It's Jaime and Brienne of Tarth. Because, I'm sorry, why would my girl get with Mr. Incest? No thank you. Brienne of Tarth deserved so much better, and for some reason, Jaime is suddenly interested in her, which again, I think this whole relationship could have made more sense with more explanation. But it was just a flip of a switch, and all of a sudden, Jaime's like, no, I'm down to clown. Let's get it on. It was obvious Bran had feelings for Jaime in the first place. There's so much sexual tension in many scenes that really didn't feel like there needed to be, but it was just a relationship people necessarily didn't ask for. Include a longer fight scene and maybe turn up the brightness a bit instead of adding this scene in there that no one wanted. My girl Brienne should have been with this king over here, because who's better? He was literally like on his hands and knees in love with her. And Jaime literally goes back, crawling back to his sister so quickly after this, destroying a lot of the growth that he ultimately had built up during this season, specifically standing up to a tyrant, Cersei. But now he's like, no, actually, that I think about it, it's kind of chill what she's doing, and I'm just gonna go run away with her. No, yeah, that sounds good. But Cooch to fire, I guess. That's so nasty. Last thing I want to touch on is Littlefinger. I feel like people like to complain so much about Littlefinger's death, and I think it was rather justified and also made sense. Littlefinger was a power-hungry character who had gotten lucky so many times. I've seen so many things online talking about how he was the smartest character in Game of Thrones. He was so smart. It's like, y'all hop off. He was literally the smartest character. He brought the kingdom to his knees. No, he didn't. He had help every single time he did something. Specifically, I think one of the most obvious ways Littlefinger got lucky is with the Tully's grandma. Not lucky like that. When specifically Jaime was gonna go kill her and she didn't out Littlefinger for being in on Joffrey's death. And she's like, no, I did it. Girl, call him out too. He did it too. Take him down with you, you know? And like, he was a piece of garbage. Who cares? Also, did people think that Brandon wasn't going to be like, oh, I actually know all these horrible things he's been doing and why he's manipulating everyone and that he's taking advantage of people? Like, apparently he knows everything, so shouldn't he say something? How on earth would Littlefinger get away with what he's doing? He had also backed himself into a corner while Sansa was the only person that actually still was protecting him. While his death was demeaning with him having to beg for his life at the end, I don't really understand how he could have gotten out of that situation. He can't talk his way out of a room of people that all hate him. His only way was to essentially plea for Sansa's emotional side, which she had turned that side back off. Homegirl's in charge. She don't gotta have emotions no more. Ultimately, I think Littlefinger's death was very great and unexpected and very well justified and written out. So, y'all haters, stay hating. Not my problem. Overall, I think Game of Thrones was a really well written show. I wish they didn't feel the need to rush things in the final season with network and media pressure, and also in the early seasons didn't need to include so much smut, but rather focus on the good plot points. And I think this would have been easier without putting those creepy producers in place that have comments like this. And I don't think people should write off a show just because they hear the ending is bad and put people off of it because of that. I really enjoyed the journey. Some of the best episodes of TV I've ever watched were within Game of Thrones. And no show will ever be exactly perfect. Except for me, maybe Pantheon and Attack on Titan and Fleabag would be my favorite shows. And despite the weirdness and nudity, I did enjoy the show overall. And I really hope people choose not to write off shows in the future like this just because the ending isn't something they necessarily expected. The writing can still be appreciated during those peak times where you did really enjoy it. And it's okay not to love the ending of something, but to love everything else about it. Well, I hope you learned something today. And bye.